Okay. All right, it's already 11 here in Poland, but I think we will just wait one more minute. I have some technical things to share with you. Can you hear me, by the way? Is the voice quality good? Okay. Now, there are several people joining us here and many more people joining through YouTube stream. There is one little limitation because we are sharing the screen as you see the screen now with all the viewers on YouTube. So if you don't wish to be seen, or if you wish to, well, log off and maybe log on
very good.
YouTube, then obviously I would like you to know that your faces are also seen on YouTube channel. So if you don't mind, we will stay like this because many people couldn't join us here through Google Meet and they could only join us through YouTube stream. It's 11:01. I think, Lucas, we could start, I think, because many more people will be joining. And I have just one little question for the people on YouTube. Is the voice quality good, and can you hear us? Yes, thank you, Jakub. I can see because you have the chat there, and that's the best thing you can use. Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Pomeranian University in Słupsk here on live stream today. And I would like to introduce to you this beautiful event today that we are hosting, because we are hosting great guests today or tonight, again, wherever you are in the world. My name is Marek Łukasik, and I'm the head of the Pomeranian Center for Digital Humanities here at Pomeranian University in Słupsk. And well, we just wanted to let you know that this event is a really special event for us here at Pomeranian University, because we have started tackling the idea and the problems connected with AI. And Lucas, a good colleague of mine, agreed to hold a talk specifically for you, but also for all the viewers across Poland and the world, because I know there are many more people coming from beyond Poland as well. So please introduce yourselves through YouTube if you can, so I will know where you are from. But this event is to basically introduce us all really to the concepts linked to AI, and especially the AI in academia. There are problems, but there are also some issues that are connected with what has already been done, what is being done at the moment. It's all about regulations, it's more about law, it's also about local regulations at your universities, and obviously, we all need to know what is happening out there. And LUKAS WESEMANN, who is a colleague from the University of Melbourne, Australia, well, willingly decided to share his views on this specific topic. So LUKAS is a postdoctoral research fellow in the field of nanotechnology at the University of Melbourne, Australia. And he holds strong interests in artificial intelligence and machine learning, and in particular, the effects it has on academic research and education. He writes a lot about that on his LinkedIn and through also a weekly email newsletter. And let me just say that he's organizing AI community events for people building AI startups in Melbourne. So, Lucas, welcome to this meeting. Thank you for accepting this invitation and your willingness to share your expertise, your views, and whatever is happening in the world. Let me just add one little thing, if I may. A technical thing. We are meeting through Google Meet, so you're all able to connect, I think, through Google Meet. So the best way to ask a question or maybe to comment something is to leave a message in a chat box, because if we unmute our mics at the same time, that will probably become a little bit messy. So my idea is that you leave a message through chat, and then we will read out the messages, your questions, your comments. And the same applies to all of you there through connecting through YouTube. You can use chat, and please do use the chat to first let us know where you're from, and secondly, to ask any questions. So thank you. That was a technical thing. It's 5 minutes past 11 here in Poland, and that's 9 p.m., 5 past 9 p.m. in Australia, I guess, Lucas.
That's right. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Marek.
The floor is yours. Thank you so much again.
Please do let me know when the screen is sharing.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining the talk today. I will be talking a little bit about the opportunities and risks that have opened up for academia over the last year with the rise of artificial intelligence, or more specifically, generative artificial intelligence. And I'm sure you're aware that it has been a pretty wild year for artificial intelligence in general, but also for artificial intelligence in academia. We've seen the launch of ChatGPT late last year in 2022, and it reaching 100 million users just 2 months after its launch, which is pretty impressive and makes it one of the fastest growing apps in history. Naturally, the investment into generative AI startups has absolutely skyrocketed this year, and we've seen world leaders in technology call for a slowdown in the development of artificial intelligence tools. Now, when ChatGPT first came out, I was curious to try it, but my expectations were pretty low because chatbots at that time were, especially general chatbots, were not that useful. However, when I tried it, I was quite impressed with what it was able to do. And I asked myself what the consequences would be for higher education and for research. And so did many other academics. And it didn't take very long until people started using it for writing academic papers. In one particular example, researchers from the UK used it to write a paper and prove a point that they could get it past peer review, which they did. And we've also seen a lot of important policymakers, including the UNESCO, the Australian government here, where I am researching, or the European Research Council, releasing guidelines on the use of AI in education and research this year. So in this talk, I really want to give an introduction to the question, how will AI transform academia and how should we use it? And I hope to inspire some interesting discussions after the talk. The best way that we can probably do a show of hands here of who's already using AI would be if you could let me know in the chat box if you are already using tools like ChatGPT in your daily workflow. And I'd also particularly be particularly interested if you have at least once used the paid version of ChatGPT that gives access to the newest model of ChatGPT. Nature Publishing did a survey among postdocs in September this year and found that about a third of the postdoctoral researchers in that survey used AI chatbots on a regular basis. Not surprisingly, mostly to refine text, but probably a bit more surprising also to generate code used, for example, to plot data in statistical analysis. Now, generative AI is a subcategory of artificial intelligence, which we can broadly define as the simulation of human intelligence in machines. And generative AI then aims to create new data that is similar to a given data set that it was trained on. And we've seen a massive surge of generative AI tool over the last year in categories including writing. That's where tools like ChatGPT, Google Bard, Claude fall into. We've also seen image generation and video generation tools. You've probably heard of DALL-E or Midjourney at some point. And then there are more specialized tools, including for code generation. It's where a lot of people use GitHub Copilot or multimedia applications. Initially, a lot of these models were focused on one particular imaging modality like text or image or video, but we're now increasingly seeing models that can mix these modalities. For example, take image plus text as input or output a mixture of these modalities. One of these that I find particularly impressive is still the conversion from text to video. So in this case, I used a model or a tool called Runway ML, and I gave it this text prompt here. So prompt is an input into one of these models, and asking it to produce a spectacular video of a bird in the jungle. And the output from this model is then this video here that is entirely AI generated purely on the text input that I gave it. So these models really demonstrate that generative AI has become really powerful, especially over the last few years. At the center of the whole generative AI craze, though, were large language models, in particular the consumer-facing app ChatGPT. And large language models are deep artificial neural networks that aim to understand and generate natural human language. And there are many ways that we can build large language models, but the architecture that has really led to the current breakthrough was the transformer architecture that was released by Google and the University of Toronto in 2017. And what transformers are really good at is taking large amounts of text data and learning statistical associations within the training data to then produce new data as output. It's important to understand that their understanding of text is based on these statistical associations and not on conceptual understanding, which will help us to later on better understand some of the shortcomings of the models that we currently have. So what transformers really do is they become really good at predicting the next word in a sentence. So if we, for example, have the sentence, the best thing about AI is its ability to, then a transformer has learned to predict the probability of the next word in that sequence. And by constantly predicting the next word, it's then able to iteratively build up longer sequences of texts, for example, to produce an entire essay. The most prominent consumer-facing applications that use large language models in the background are ChatGPT, produced by OpenAI. And it's very important to note that there are two main versions of ChatGPT at the moment. There's the free version that gives access to the ChatGPT 3 model. That's mostly text. And then there is the paid version that gives access to ChatGPT 4, which has a strongly improved performance, but also allows multimodal operations. So we can not only produce or input text, we can also input images as well as other files, including, for example, spreadsheets. It has access to the internet, so it can retrieve current information, and it also allows the use of plugins to extend its capabilities. One of the more impressive multimodal demonstrations that we've seen early on from ChatGPT that are here reproduced from the GPT-4 technical report was that it can, for example, extract humor from images. So in this example here, the image shows a phone charger that, however, looks like a monitor cable. And together with the question, what is funny about this image, ChatGPT is then able to produce an answer that explains the humor in this image, something that was for a long time thought to be extremely hard using artificial intelligence. We can also use these multimodal features to ask it questions about exams. again, an example from the technical report here. This is a physics exam, and the input here was a screenshot of a physics exam together with a prompt to solve a question in that exam. Now, it is of course required now to read the text in the screenshot, but also to extract meaning from the figure that was in that exam. And ChatGPT was able to produce an answer based on this input that would have passed this exam. Now, it's important to test the performance of large language models in a more systematic manner, of course. And this was done as well in the GPT-4 technical report when it was first released. And on standardized tests, for example, the SAT in the United States, it scored a human level performance in categories including writing and reading, as well as in math. It also scored an impressive human level performance on the uniform bar exam, which is a lawyer admission exam. There are other papers that have looked at the performance of large language models like ChatGPT on university physics exams, which is, of course, the area I'm working in. So that's the area I'm most interested in. And what they found is that it didn't outperform human performance. The average human performance is here shown with the black dots. But it did, however, score a pass mark in 9 out of 11 exam types, which definitely indicates that students will use these tools in exams and for their homework, and that it's really time to take these tools very seriously in higher education. Now, I believe that the best way to develop an intuition for what is possible with generative AI or AI more general is to go through some of the tools and use cases relevant to research and higher education, and then point out some of the risks and benefits along the way. Now, one of the more basic application of ChatGPT is to perform operations such as summarizing text, paraphrasing text, explaining or correcting text, and in some cases even translating text. And what I did here in this example is that I copied an entire website of a conference that I went to recently and asked it to summarize it in 5 bullet points. And it did that very neatly. Now, with the newest version of ChatGPT, I wouldn't even have to copy the website anymore. I could just give it the link to the conference website, and it would then retrieve the information by itself. Now, it's very important to understand that this was public information that I put into ChatGPT, which is probably okay in most cases. But if we use it in research or education, the information that we might feed into ChatGPT might be private information, or might be confidential information that we're not allowed to feed into ChatGPT, because in the end, this information is transmitted to a private company. So it's very important to take into account these privacy and confidentiality considerations when we use ChatGPT for these kind of applications. ChatGPT is also really useful in a education or research context for initial learning about new methods. We can ask it to explain certain methods or concepts to us, and then we can ask follow-up questions on particular elements of the answer that we might not have understood or that were too complex. That is something that we can, of course, not really do if we just do a Google search. It's also useful to brainstorm ideas around new concepts or to generate outlines for presentations or talks. And it can help in the same way to draft surveys. That might be something more relevant to, for example, the social science or the humanities. There is, however, an issue, especially when we use it to learn about new methods, that is referred to as hallucinations. Now, if we remember, large language models are really good at predicting the next word in a sequence of words, and a lot of the time that results in factual information. However, it does not have to, and when it doesn't, it can become pretty dangerous. There was an impressive case recently here in Australia where Australian academics used a chatbot, the Googlebot chatbot, to prepare a parliamentary inquiry accusing the big 4 consultancy firms of all sorts of wrongdoings. And it turned out that a lot of the accusations were completely unfactual. They were completely hallucinated by Googlebot. And that was, of course, extremely embarrassing for the academics who had not double-checked the information that came out of the chatbot. Any academic at some point will perform a literature review, and literature reviews can be extremely time intense. They can span anywhere between a week to several months when we start our PhD, for example. And large language models have become very good at allowing us to speed up the literature review process. Now, it's again important to remember large language models can hallucinate and make up fake citations. That was a big problem early on. We now have a lot of plugins that help us to connect ChatGPT to actual citation databases. And if we do that, ChatGPT is able to produce on-demand reviews for a certain research question with clickable references that lead to the website, where we can then double check that the publications actually exist. There's also a few dedicated tools for that we can use to perform our literature reviews. I particularly like Cite, which allows you to write little on-demand review paragraphs for a certain question. We can, for example, ask it to summarize the main findings in a certain field over the last 4 years, and it will write a little paragraph with citations that we can click that then directly lead to the publication website. So I presume that over the next couple of years, the traditional format of a review paper will probably disappear, and we will see more on-demand review papers generated by an AI. A feature that I find extremely useful in my work is that ChatGPT allows you to, in a way, talk to your data and to write code. So if you're in a discipline where you have to plot a lot of statistical data or evaluate a lot of data from your measurements, then this will probably be very useful for you as well. So in this case, I gave it a spreadsheet and asked it to generate code, in this case in Python, to create a specific plot for me. And it performs very well at writing code. And it's code with comments, so you can go through it and understand what the code does. And then when I executed the code, then I obtained the plot that I asked for. And that's where it becomes really interesting, because now we can iteratively change the code by asking it to achieve certain things. In this little example here, I asked it, for example, to make the color bar a bit thinner because I thought it was too thick. And I also asked it to animate the plot. And the result was exactly what I asked for. So this can massively speed up the process of creating visual material for publications, for example, or to quickly evaluate data along the way in your research process. It's important to note that large language models are still prone to reasoning errors, especially symbolic reasoning, and that's where plugins like, for example, Wolfram Alpha can really help to improve the quality of their outputs. In terms of multimodal applications, I found it really interesting to combine photos, for example, of laboratory equipment with text input that can massively speed up the time it takes to set up equipment. If you're in a non-technical field, I'm sure there are equivalent cases for this. And in this particular case, it recognized what tool it was, and it also recognized which specific model it was, and then provided me with code to get up and running with this device, which could usually take anywhere from a few hours to a week. And in this case, it took me less than 5 minutes. A lot of work in social sciences is often built around interviewing candidates. And this is where some of the models that OpenAI provides in the speech-to-text sector could become very useful, in particular to record interviews from voice straight to text, or to automate the coding or labeling of transcripts in a much more efficient fashion than it is done at the moment. So also, we can also imagine that this will extend to video analysis, but that is still in its early stages at the moment. We can also look at the other end of the spectrum, where we look at text to speech. So producing human-sounding text from written human-sounding speech from written text, and that could be used, for example, for automated voice interviewing. These tools, including, for example, the ones provided by 11 Labs, have become incredibly good over the last years. And if you're still used to these super robotic sounding voices, I think you'd be very impressed listening to some of those more modern AI models that can really work with tonality and can really produce naturally sounding voices. So this could, again, of course, massively speed up research processes where interviewing is required and maybe parallelize hundreds or even thousands of interviews. Again, this is, of course, an area with a lot of privacy concerns, and I believe only enterprise agreements that universities have with these kind of organizations will allow the usage of these models in a research or education context. You're probably reading a lot of PDF articles as part of your research or even as part of your education processes, and it can often be very time consuming to find one specific piece of information in a stack of PDFs. Tools like ChatGPT now allow us to talk to a PDF and ask questions, and it will then go and read the PDF and give us an answer. And we can continue the conversation from there on and ask follow-up questions. And it is relatively easy to confirm a piece of information once we know what we're looking for in a PDF. But if we have an initial question, it can be quite time consuming. So I found this quite useful, and I'm sure it can save a lot of people time researching the literature. Now, there's no real manual for ChatGPT, and the way that we interact with ChatGPT makes a big difference in the quality of its outputs. And the field that deals with improving the outputs of large language models, like the one used in ChatGPT, is called prompt engineering. There are many different strategies to improve the quality, including defining roles, like you're a professor now, or you're an editor, write in this style or in that style. Give me an output in bullet points, for example. There are also prompting catalogs where we have templates for certain actions already given. And then there are some very obscure strategies that people are trying out at the moment, including asking it to take a deep breath or offering it money for a good answer. And surprisingly, some of them actually have improved the quality. People do actual real research into these things. These things are probably a result of the training data that went into ChatGPT. One of the more exciting features that was recently released by OpenAI are so-called custom GPTs. And custom GPTs are ChatGPTs that we can configure with our own instructions and where we can provide our own data. And every time we talk to a custom GPT, it will then give an answer based on the files and the instructions that we provided. And we can, for example, imagine a custom GPT for a particular research group where all of the relevant literature gets fed into the GPT together with maybe notes from previous students, as well as information about the group. And any new student can then interact with this custom GPT to very quickly get up to speed when they join the group. Or a professor could, for example, ask questions about all of the different projects that happened over the years. Again, this is something that from a privacy or confidentiality perspective will only be possible if universities have these enterprise agreements with companies like Microsoft or OpenAI, and I'm pretty sure that that is what we will see over the next year. Naturally, with all these impressive capabilities of large language models, the question comes up whether LLMs can fundamentally reason. And there is no easy answer to that. It's a very complex question and an active field of research. What we can say is that it really comes down to the types of reasoning we're looking at, whether it is deductive reasoning, for example. And we can say that it is good at some types of common sense reasoning, but it is clearly limited in planning task or symbolic reasoning. For anybody interested in this, I recommend the paper Towards Reasoning in Large Language Models, a survey from the University of Illinois. Now, I would like to use the last part of my talk to speak a bit about the near future, where we could see the technology that we have right now find its way into both education as well as research. So obviously, the AI models that we have right now have the potential to have a huge impact in higher education. On the one hand side, we can imagine them reducing the load on educators that could use them, for example, to generate curricula and content. They will be very helpful for hyper-personalized learning, where every student can have the content delivered in a slightly different way that matches their learning style. And we're seeing first examples of that, for example, with Khan Academy. And they have the potential to equalize education because they can make education models like one-on-one tutoring affordable for every student, which is not the case at the moment. They can also promote inclusivity and accessibility, where non-native speakers have a better chance at participating in the research or education process in other countries. And then there is the whole question of how AI might help to improve student supervision. So student supervision is an extremely time-consuming task, but we can imagine an AI support here that would, for example, constantly search the internet for opportunities, scholarships, conferences for a very specific student and send the supervisor a report once a month that the supervisor can then discuss with the student. Something, again, that at the moment is very time-consuming. However, there are also issues with the use of AI in higher education, and one is access inequality. So at the moment, for example, ChatGPT costs money. The paid version costs about $30 a month. And that is, of course, something that not every student can afford. So at the moment, students that are able to spend those $30, I believe, have a massive advantage over students that can't do this. And this will probably translate into education level inequalities over the next years as well. There are also concerns around the impact this will have on writing and critical thinking skills in students. So there's a lot to say about having to sit in front of an empty page and writing the first paragraph. And if someone never has to do that and they always just straight away jump to the use of some generative AI tool, that might really hinder the development of writing or critical thinking skills. And then there's the whole issue around outdated assessment models. So a lot of assessment models, especially those that are online, they are now easily cheatable using tools like ChatGPT, and universities are trying to find their way around solving these issues, often by literally returning to pen and paper or oral exams at the moment. There's also an overarching issue in education when it comes to AI, which is that there can be a lot of bias in these models. So these models are usually trained on large amounts of internet data, and internet data, as we all know, contains a lot of bias, contains a lot of racism, and these sorts of things can find their way into these models. And if we're not careful, they will find their way into our education once these models are deployed. So this is something to be very aware of. Now, the way that universities have reacted over the last years ranged all the way from straight up banning generative AI to embracing it. So especially earlier this year in January, we've seen many universities completely ban the use of generative AI for student and faculty. Sciences Po in Paris was one example for that. They've since moved more towards the careful usage part of the spectrum. Most universities at the moment encourage careful or very careful usage of generative AI. However, there are some universities, including the University of Hong Kong, that strongly embrace the use of generative AI for their student and faculty and train them. They provide workshops, they train them on the risks of generative AI, and they train them on being critical of the outputs of generative AI. A very important policy event happened recently where the European Union's Artificial Intelligence Act was agreed on. That was just about 2 weeks ago. And that is really the first major policy act that regulates artificial intelligence, and it has important implications for education as well. So the policy works on a risk-based tier system where it categorizes AI applications into those that are of minimal, limited, or high risk, or as those that are of unacceptable risk. And some of the implications that these policies have on higher education are that things like emotion detection, for example, in educational institution is completely banned in the EU. There are other things like using AI systems for marking and access relevant decisions, and those were classified as high risk. So most of these are only coming into effect in 2025, and it remains to be seen whether there will need to be major adjustments to be made in the next year, considering the speed at which artificial intelligence is developing at the moment. Now, the last part of this talk, I would like to talk about AI in research specifically. And most of our research happens in a typical research cycle where we start off with an idea, and then we prepare the research project, we apply for grant funding, we ensure regulatory compliance, we execute the research, and we publish it hopefully, and then we promote it at conferences. So AI can already support in the very first stage of this process when we try to form an idea. AI is already used to generate research hypotheses in many fields, including, for example, in material science, where AI is used to filter down from the millions of possible research hypotheses to just a few, and those are then actually tested. In a very impressive example here, the A-Lab at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, which is a fully automated lab that generates ideas, executes them through robotic arms, measures the results, and then iteratively and fully automatically performs the research process. Now, there is evidence that large language models can extract findings from millions of articles that are already published, and I believe that we will see a lot of progress on this end over the next years in all sciences, in the humanities and the social sciences, where people will use large language models to generate or at least support the generation of new research hypotheses. Now, once the idea is there, we usually need to go through a whole lot of bureaucracy, including, for example, performing grant applications or submitting grant applications. We need to ensure compliance with regulations, and all of these things are heavily text-based. So large language models will be of huge help there. In particular, grant applications have been a heavily discussed topic over the last years. People have started using them to write grant applications, and we really need to ask ourselves the question whether we want to spend the valuable time of researchers to write grant applications if clearly tools like ChatGPT can now write major parts of grant applications fully automatically. The Australian Research Council is relatively clear on the use of generative AI for grant applications. What they say is that you can use them in a very limited fashion to write grant applications. You cannot use them to assess grant applications for reasons around confidentiality and privacy. Then comes the actual research, and that's where AI has already been used extensively in almost every field, mostly to model and analyze data, sometimes in ways that was completely impossible before the rise of AI, including, for example, Google DeepMind, that can predict the folding of protein structures from the amino acid sequence. We've also seen the generation of code using AI, and I think we'll see a lot more in the AI decision-making support area, as well as AI to help us manage bigger projects, potentially across research groups, which can again be a very time-intense process, to then free up time for researchers to think about the actual research and higher order concepts rather than having to spend their time with the details. The area that was probably the most directly affected by tools like ChatGPT was scientific publishing. People have started to use tools like ChatGPT to write papers pretty much straight away, and scientific publishers had to react fairly quickly. And a hot topic that was discussed at this time was whether it really matters who actually writes a paper if the science is sound and the researchers take responsibility for the reliability and validity. And this remains an open question. But what we do know is that most publishers have banned the use of ChatGPT. ChatGPT can't be listed as an author, and the human researchers have to take full responsibility. We can, however, imagine totally different ways of publishing, where maybe we only have to submit the key findings and the raw data, and the writing and the data visualization is entirely performed on the end of the publisher, and we only have to sign off on the final manuscript, which would save us all a lot of time. There are also models around AI-assisted peer review, where AI reviewers could operate alongside human reviewers. However, the current models are not strong enough for that yet, so this remains something for the future. Then once the work is published, we usually go to conferences, we present our work, and we hope to find people to collaborate with on our next project. A friend of mine who works at Canva as an AI engineer, Philip Häusler, and I, we built a little prototype that can automate the generation of collaboration ideas using AI. So what this tool does is we give it the Google Scholar profiles of 2 researchers. It will then read those profiles and generate ideas for things that people can do together. That can serve, for example, as a conversation starter at a conference, or for students to play around with scientific ideation. So in this example, again, this is a physics example, it would produce an idea for people to work on, and it would indicate what each of these researchers would contribute. To come to a conclusion, I think we really have to answer a lot of urgent questions in higher education and research at the moment, in particular, how we want to ensure the security and safety of the AI systems that will find their way into our institutions. We need to decide how we want to balance the promotion versus the restriction of these systems. And we need to decide how we want to train faculty and students on these tools. I'd like to thank all of the amazing people I had the chance to talk to over the last month on this topic. And if you're interested in this topic, I'm writing a newsletter called The AI Academic that you can find on theaiacademic.com. And my friend Carl Hildreth and I, we're writing this newsletter, and we're also both quite active on LinkedIn. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take your questions.
Yes, if I can ask a question. Okay, what implications does it have for the format of evaluating students' work? Because you have mentioned this, that many universities return to this pen and paper format of exams and oral exams, but does it mean that writing papers in academia should be cancelled?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. So I think my answer would be that developing these skills is very important, and that every student should go through this process. At some point when these skills are learned, I think these tools can be an important accelerator for students to be faster at something they already know how to do. But I don't think it's a good idea to use these tools for something that we don't know how to do manually yet. So I think it would be a very bad idea to rob students of the experience to learn to write a paper. They won't have the same experience, the learning experience, and the brain wiring will probably not be the same if you've never had to go through the process of structuring and writing a paper yourself.
But I'm sure that 99% of them will be using those programs. And can we avoid it somehow?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for you, unfortunately, but I think one solution is to create education formats that include the use of generative AI. So I think trying to avoid them using it won't work. As you say, they will certainly use it. But if, for example, there are tasks where they are encouraged to use it and using it as part of the exam, but then, for example, having to critically assess the output from one of these models and writing about that, or having to talk about it in an oral exam where they can't use it, those are formats that might help significantly.
Okay, thank you so much. And we have a question that has come from the YouTube chat. I will read it out. Okay. So Anna Smolak is from Malmo is asking this question. I'm wondering if there is any research into where there is a tipping point for large language models collapse when it's inbred with AI generated content too much. Do we know how much is too much, and are we able to detect it?
Yeah, absolutely. So there has been research for different models on exactly this topic, and we can generally say that the more AI generated content goes into the training of these models, the earlier they collapse. We can see that there's very impressive examples of this for image data, for example. So if we use AI generated images to train, for example, diffusion models, then they relatively quickly collapse and produce images that look nothing like the images we would like it to produce. It's a bit harder for text to do this, but yeah, there is definitely research into exactly this question.
Okay, thank you. Now I have a question that probably is it comes from my students. In fact, they have been wondering. We are talking about large language models, so textual data. How come that ChatGPT can also recognize images as prompts?
Yeah, so there are other architectures behind that. For example, in the specific case of images, it's a vision transformer behind that. Some of the details aren't fully known, but basically what they do is they try to feed all of the content, image as well as text into the same backend and then produce the output from there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And I have a question myself. I mean, ChatGPT has recently been accused of being lazy, right? What could that be an effect of?
Yeah, so that's one of these really interesting things, surprising things about large language models that we're still discovering along the way. So the specific case you're referring to was something that people noticed recently towards the end of the year. And people assume that in the training data of ChatGPT, it was somehow represented that towards the holiday season, people are less productive. So the model has relearned to replicate this. So there were now people starting their prompt with "it is August," and then they continue from there. Yeah, it sounds funny, but in the same way that these things work, apparently it also works to tell ChatGPT to take a deep breath or tell it to give it $200 for a good answer, because probably the training data on the internet contained examples of that where people were offered money and then they produced a better or more helpful answer.
All right. Do we have some other questions, maybe? I see some greetings coming in through YouTube from Ukraine, Bulgaria, Croatia. So we have an audience here. So lots of thanks for the great talk, by the way. So those are coming as well. I was, I mean, coming back to this laziness problem, I studied ChatGPT answers and all the possibilities, the outputs since January 2023. And telling the truth, I can see it becoming, lazy in a way. So like even if it was not the paid version, so 3.5 model, I still got better results than I do now with 4.0. And this is quite a surprising outcome in a way, because I'm researching that in linguistics and in particular terminology and dictionary making, for example. So I could get like extensive, answers and really great conceptual work. Now it's a little bit different. Very often I can see ChatGPT referring to me or to external resources. So, you should maybe read more about this, or this is a difficult question, and maybe it's more like down to more human kind of assessment. So this is quite a funny thing, because we have been expecting the model to produce the answers. So maybe we're maybe that's going to change, because I've read also some answers from OpenAI to basically repair this somehow. But there has already been a collapse at some point, right? So this happens with large language models.
Yeah, I mean, it's often hard to know what happens behind the scenes at OpenAI. For competitive reasons and for security reasons, a lot of the details about these models are not released. So it's hard to tell what they engineered and what is a side effect. Mm-hmm. But if we, for example, look at the GPT-4 technical report that was released alongside with GPT-4, there is very little information about how the models were trained or what the model architecture was. So it becomes increasingly hard to make any statements about how these models work under the hood. It's kind of like a car where you're never allowed to see the engine. And yeah, what you say is a very important aspect, but I believe, except for the people working at OpenAI, nobody really knows at the moment.
Mm-hmm. There's another question coming in through YouTube. A quick question from Jakub. How has the integration of AI impacted research methodologies in academia?
That's a very interesting question. I think due to the uncertainty around what is allowed and what is not allowed, a lot of people that use it at the moment, they're not very public with it. So we have these postdoc surveys that give us a first indication. I personally know that a lot of people are using it, for example, to write computer code. So creating graphs from your data used to be an extremely slow process. You can spend days just fixing one little feature, searching on the internet to find that one command that moves the legend from the top right corner to the bottom left corner. These things are now a matter of minutes. So that's where we can already see a huge speed up. And I think we will see more and more of these tools and helpful AI agents to find their way into research processes. It depends a lot on the specific area you're working in. So I obviously work in physics, and it will be very different there than it will be in social science or the humanities. I think one aspect that I would probably say affects all researchers in the same way will be AI-assisted literature reviews. Because everybody has to review some sort of literature, everybody has to summarize literature, and everybody has to stay on top of the latest developments in their field. And I think that used to be an extremely time-consuming process, and I think it won't be anymore in a year from now.
Mm-hmm. There is another question from Anna. I'm wondering, from an academia teacher's perspective, how different is it to read and grade students' papers that were, well, tweaked by AI versus old school student papers?
Thanks again. Also a very good question. And that really comes down to a bigger issue I think we see at the moment, where a lot of institutions have very vague policies around the use of generative AI, often very centered around what cannot be done and mentioning only very vaguely what can be done. In some universities, these kind of policies are only existent on the individual school level, or maybe even only individual group level. So that makes it very complex for people to use these policies to actually apply them to students that submitted their homework. The best approach is probably to closely read the policies that the university or school has released, and then try to apply it as much as possible. Most universities require students to declare the use of generative AI when they use it, and if students don't declare it, then that's a clear breach of academic integrity, I would say.
Yeah, I will comment on that as well, because those issues have already emerged also at our university. And there is the matter of originality. So that's basically where, we can treat it as an original paper or a thesis or not. And that's basically down to the policy, as you said. So the policy making at the moment, we're lagging. Probably most of the universities to some extent are lagging at the moment, maybe catching up a little bit on that, but obviously the originality of work, that's my perspective, is the most important element, just to show and to, to boost, to promote, reasoning, human reasoning. So that's basically where we're at the moment. So I don't know if you agree, but that's basically about the policies, and obviously also the execution of the policies, because that's also a very important element. So obviously there are also detectors, online detectors, but also commercial ones, which are way better than those free online versions that can easily recognize ChatGPT written content. So at some point, it's down to acknowledging the fact that we have used AI in the process. That's my point of view, really, on the basis of the experience already from both this university here in Poland, but also from the University of Turin in Italy, when I'm a visiting professor, and where the policies were also made, but obviously the whole big issue of ChatGPT becoming very, widely available was really like a big thing. So the university had to, and chiefly the entire country had to quickly rethink the policies regarding the use of AI in the classroom and also in the study process. But I have another question from a viewer on YouTube, Sleepyhead Mary, that's the nickname. A lot of students in, let's say, linguistics and translation are afraid of becoming obsolete. How can we reassure young adults that they still have a bright future despite AI mass usage?
Yeah, I think those fears, they often come from the perception that AI will just completely replace researchers in the very near future. Now, whether that will happen at some point in the far future, I don't know. It is possible, but I think that is nothing we should worry about right now. At the moment, I think anybody who is AI literate in a way, so who is able to use AI tools, will just be a lot more productive at performing their job than they were probably a few years ago. And I don't think that AI touches on any of the more fundamental capabilities of humans, especially real creativity or real generating really groundbreaking research hypotheses yet.
Yeah, but when it comes to graphics, for example, the question is, do we really need the real thing, so to speak? Many people are already fine with AI generated content, and I mean the graphics, for example, the videos and so on, and think that they are way better in terms of being more creative in a way because of the possibilities than humans are, maybe, like I recently tried to, I wanted the ChatGPT model to draw an image for me, with a prompt being, okay, I need a Schrodinger's cat in a box, and with the flying in outer space, with an inscription on the box saying, am I dead or alive? And I mean, I was amazed by the quality of the image. You obviously see that's electronically created, but it was quite nice. So just for logos, for any kind of structures that, but also interior design, Now, this past weekend, my friends came with a visit, and they are now redecorating their flat, and they wanted just to see if ChatGPT can suggest a few designs of their new kitchen. They provided some data, like, you know, what they would like to install, what kind of, you know, utensils they will have inside, and where the window will be. And so, I mean, it was brilliant. So some jobs may go. I mean, we know that already. There is the UN report saying that. So basically, we should be a little bit skeptical that it will replace the humans, but some jobs will go, I think. So the repetitive kind of job, and you know, when it comes to translations, I mean, technical translations are basically already done using AI, because when you have CAT tools, so computer assisted translation tools, they are already plugged into Google, for example, Translate. You can do that. So obviously that also means that it uses some of the technology. There is one last question before we go, because it's already 12. And there is Patricia Shevchik writing, how much AI-driven tools assist teachers in assessing and grading students' performance more efficiently and accurately?
Yeah, so this is obviously one of the dangerous areas, because the way that we assess students has huge impacts on their lives and potentially on their careers. Also very closely related to using AI tools to giving students access to a degree, or selecting who can study a certain degree. And we've seen that in the EU AI Policy Act now, that especially those applications are classified as high risk. So I think it will be a while until we see a strong representation of AI tools in those areas. There are also concerns around confidentiality. If a teacher, for example, takes the homework of their students and just puts it into ChatGPT, that is almost certainly a breach of the privacy regulations of the university. So I think while it can technically already support the process, we need to be very careful what we do there at the moment. And I think there is still a lot of regulatory work to be done before that becomes a reality.
Lukas, I think we can call it a meeting. I would like to thank you so much for accepting the invitation, for the great talk. There are many thank you notes coming in through YouTube.
Thank you,
everybody. I think we can join your newsletter and the website. We can find you on LinkedIn, so that we are more up to date with whatever is happening in the AI world. And I hope we will be able to meet again using the technology and build this bridge between Poland, the Pomeranian University in Słupsk, and Melbourne University and Australia. And it's been great having you here. So I would like to thank you. I would like to thank all the participants who decided to join our meeting. I would like to thank all YouTube people who are there and watching us at the moment, or maybe later on. And I would like to invite you to both Lukas's in LinkedIn, but also please remember to visit the website of Pomeranian University in Słupsk, www.upsl.edu.pl. And there is also the website is also in English, and you can always get in touch with us. And Lukas, thank you. And see you next time. Happy holidays, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, and happy holidays. See you soon. Thanks, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.